Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
In the news lately, there's been lots of talk about the First Amendment, and this is not going to get political. I promise you it's not going to get political. But the First Amendment is really the cornerstone of the United States. We have the ability, and if I have people from other countries, it's, we have the ability to say what's on our mind. And that's just, it's a beautiful thing about the United States. In other countries as well, but it's, we have sort of a free flow of information, and we have that right. We can criticize the government. We should be able to criticize the government. And I know that kind of touches on some political stuff, and I'm not going there. But generally speaking, for 200 plus years, as long as the United States has been around, as long as we've had the First Amendment to the Constitution, we know we have that right to freely express ourselves. Now, there are some limitations to it, and there always should. With every right there are limitations. The one that the Supreme Court has said is that you can't shout fire in a crowded movie theater. You can't incite panic. The other thing is that you can't incite violence, and those are limitations on free speech. But beyond that, you can certainly say the things you want to say, or should be able to say the things you want to be able to say. You should be able to express an opinion, whatever it is. I don't like this president. I don't like this senator. I don't like this. I don't like this policy. And people freely do it. If you look on YouTube, if you watch mainstream news and other news outlets, that people are sharing their opinions. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. You may not like it, but they have the right to say it. And that was a landmark Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court was, the ACLU is essentially representing, I'm trying to think, people, there was a parade in Skokie, Illinois. It was a very anti-Semitic parade. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, you may not like it. We don't like it, but they have the right to say it. And I'm shameful. I went to law school. I should remember the name of the case. Anyhow, First Amendment, we have the right to say the things we want to say. And that's great. But I hear people who will say things and they're like, well, I have the right to say that. And while you have the right to say that, you have to understand that there's an obligation or responsibility too. And that obligation or responsibility is that you need to endure or live up to the consequences that come with saying whatever you want to say. Somebody, well, again, I don't want to dip my toe too much into politics, but the Dixie Chicks said something bad about the president, and they were essentially canceled for that. Roseanne Barr, same thing. You know what? They had the right to say those things, but they have to endure the consequences, right or wrong. And those are big picture examples. And I don't, you can say what you want, but you have to endure the consequences of that. And I hear people saying on a smaller scale, well, I'm going to say it. And if people don't like it, that's fine. Great. They can take their business elsewhere. So that really kind of dovetails into this program, how to communicate successfully in challenging situations. And when I say challenging situations, I'm not talking about confrontational situations, right? Although it could be that, but challenging situations. And what I mean by challenging situations are situations where the available resources or perhaps your abilities can't meet the wants or needs of somebody else. Or maybe its opinions vary. Those are challenging situations, and really those situations are around us all the time. Most of my days are communicating in challenging situations. Yeah, I have conversations with my kids or my wife or friends, and it's happy-go-lucky. But in the business world, there are always limited resources, limited abilities, varying opinions about how things should be, and every situation is either immediately challenging, or has the potential to be challenging. And so, we need to kind of be on guard with respect to our communications at all time to try and do the best we can. So what I want to do with the balance of the program today is just share some examples of how things can be said and how they can be said better, because how we say things can determine whether something challenging becomes really controversial or blows up in our face. And you'll see when I start getting into the examples. And you know what? There are tons of these sorts of examples out there. I'm sure people want to fire in the comments. They can fire in their own examples, and that's great. Um, but I see. Well, I've screwed up, right? I've screwed up in the past, and those who know me know I'm not perfect. I've screwed up in the past, and it's like, I wish I'd have said that differently. And it's not necessarily a black and white sort of a thing, but it might be little things that I might have done better. So anyhow, um, somebody might say, "Why do you say that?" And that can hit people the wrong way. And a better way of saying it, can you tell me more about what you mean when you say whatever, as opposed to why did you say that? And I had that situation the other day. I got an email. Well, why did you say that? And it just hit me funny. It's just like, okay, this, email already is something that's somewhat well, it's challenging, right? Because you just don't know. You have to kind of infer the tone, and I find that I infer the tone based on, if I know the person, I infer the tone based on what my feelings or my my in-person interactions with those people have been, or my over Zoom interactions have been. And if they're somewhat challenging or confrontational, then I kind of read that into the email as well. So that's certainly one example. I have a series of others here. I'm gonna just got to work through my notes. One that I hear from time to time is "I always" or "I never," and I always think that creates a challenging situation because it's I, I don't think we can be so definitive about who we are that we can say always or never. Now, again, I may be guilty of these things, but I think a better way of approaching that is I try to do this, or I try to not do this, as opposed to being definitive. Well, I always check my email. I always send a confirmation. Well, it's entirely possible that you didn't. Oh well. So to say you might not have, just kind of, it just it, it it's treason to the possibility that you might have screwed up. Or another one is I don't know. And I think that's always problematic for us. That's just throwing up our hands. Well, I don't know. Good luck to you. And I think we can do better in those times with respect to communication by, let me investigate this. Let me, I don't have the answer right now, but let me look into it. Which kind of gets into a few others that are here. Um, hey, it's not my job is another one. That one is um, well, that harkens to the people at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and I'm confident in saying that none of the people from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles are listening. So I don't know that I've offended anybody with respect to that. But hey, it's not my job. It just kind of rings hollow. It's almost like you need to figure it out for yourself. And I think a better way to approach that is, you know what, you can say, hey, it's not my job, but listen, this is what I'm going to do. It's not going to be the end of it. I'm going to forward this thing on, or you know what, that's really not in my wheelhouse, but let me dig into it and let me get back to you with an answer. Or I might refer you on to somebody else. Or I've copied into this the person who you should be talking to, so they're aware of it. And just kind of that next step with respect to the relationship. And again, you can take a normal situation, you can make it challenging, and then challenging becomes confrontational if we're not careful. Um, something like I will not. I mean, again, that's like a never or an always, and you can tone that down a little bit by saying, unfortunately, I'm unable to do whatever at this time, but maybe here's some alternatives, as opposed to just cutting people off. Um, or I guess similar to that is telling somebody, I'll try to get that done for you. And that just really that can be improved upon by simply, I'm going to get to that today, just setting some parameters. I'm going to get to that today, or I will get to that, tomorrow or whenever. I'm going to get back to you somehow, some way, and then following through on with respect to what you have to say. One that has always rubbed me the wrong way. I heard this all the time from, I won't name the person, but ha- would be commenting about or complaining, I guess, about something. No one else is having this issue. No one else is complaining about this. Well, it's almost like, what's wrong with you? No one else is complaining. And you know, I, I can see where I have run afoul of that. I've got a big organization. We've got a complicated website. There's always something. There's always something going wrong. I mean, that's just the nature. Business is like a house. There's always something breaking down. Um, but I need to be me. I need to be, and you. I need to be cognizant of the notion of how that hits people. Um, and when something's happening, just saying, I know it's frustrating. We're not getting other people reporting this. Can I dig into with you what you're experiencing? Because I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to solve it. A couple others that I have that I really like, and saving the best for last here. One of the things I was taught early on, um, when I got really into this business and kind of transitioned from being an attorney to somebody who's working with people on relationships, don't hit people with "I want to tell you." Let me share with you. It just hits differently. And when it was explained to me, it's like, oh my gosh, that is so right. That's so good. Um, and another one was, uh, this is what I think. You know, talking about somebody's product or service or whatever they've done. And what somebody taught me to do is say, hey, listen, can I share some feedback? Are you okay with it? And then if they don't like what you have to say, you gave them the opening. I want to share some feedback. I want to try and help you. And then you can, obviously you're gonna want to be somewhat diplomatic depending upon whatever you have to say. But you want to be careful about, but you want to offer them the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to hear. And if they want to hear, then that's fine. But the one that I really like is, a poor way of communicating is, you're wrong. I disagree. And I'll credit this to one of my friends, one of my franchisees, Dean Curry. What he taught me to share was, and hopefully he's on today, listening, because he generally does. Um, what he taught me is, rather than just telling somebody you're wrong or I disagree, to say something as simple as, you know what, lots of people think the way you do, and I used to think that way too, but this is what I discovered. And then you lay out why you disagree. um, and it just hits so much better to communicate that way, because you're basically saying is that, okay, you're not saying you're wrong, but a lot of people think like you, and that's okay. Um, and I used to think that way, and it kind of, they're, I don't want to say it's lowered their guard, but you're not hitting them across the head with something. But this is why I changed my way of thinking, and they're going to allow you to push forth your thoughts at that point. You still may disagree, but you have taken a challenging situation, and you softened it up a whole lot. Now, I will say that none of this stuff is easy. It takes practice. It takes, because generally these things are hitting you. Even email, it's hitting you. and it's at the speed of business. And people, on the phone or on a Zoom, and people want answers. And so you need to somewhat practice in your mind how these things will play out. You need to be very good at taking a deep breath and counting to 10 under your breath, if you will. With respect to emails, you need to, unless an answer needs absolutely right now, in most of the cases, that's not the situation. You need to be willing just to kind of sit on the answer and think on it, maybe sleep on it if you need to. Certainly write notes, to yourself, or jot out, hey, these are different ways that I can approach these situations. As I have with Dean, I've noted, he shared that with me, and I noted it, and I try to use it as often as I can. So think on these things. You have the right to say whatever you want. You can say, Frank, you're full of it. I'm just going to tell people they're wrong, and that's just who I am, and I'm blunt, and great. You're welcome to do that. You have a First Amendment right to do it. Say whatever you want, certainly in the United States. But you have to live with those consequences. And sometimes those consequences can come back to haunt you. And so you want to, relationships aren't easy. You want to preserve them as much as you possibly can.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.